Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get started with Week 24's Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, for this entire series, I've been pulling words for these Word Nerd Wednesdays from my Third Age Thursday readings. We've looked at Mithril, Arkenstone and Eorknestan, Wizard, Uruk and Orc, the Brandywine River, and the many names of Gandalf. Today, I'll continue that trend one more time as I do a deep dive into one of the places Gandalf has been on his adventures as described in the Quest of Erebor. Dol Guldur. The very name conjures up terrifying images of darkness, of Sauron reborn, and of the dungeons in which Gandalf encountered Thorin's father, Thrain, a dwarf whose mind had been ripped away along with the last of the dwarven rings. But what does the name mean? Well, before we get to what its name now means, let's look at what it used to be called. This highest point of the Highlands, located in the southwest part of the Greenwood, was once called Amon Lanc. That's a Sindarin name, and I'm sure I don't need to explain the first element. Amon is, of course, Sindarin for hill, as in Amon Hen, Amon Sul, or in its plural form, Emin Muil. But Lanc isn't one we've seen before, and for good reason. It's nowhere else found in the legendarium. Now, according to a footnote in The Disaster of the Gladden Fields in Unfinished Tales, Lanc means naked, and the hill was named Amon Lanc because no trees grew on its summit. Amon Lanc had been the ancient dwelling of Orifer, father to Thranduil, grandfather of Legolas. But another footnote in The Disaster of the Gladden Fields explains that, being disturbed by rumors of the rising power of Sauron, Orifer had left their ancient dwellings about Amon Lanc across the river from their kin in Lorien. 3 times he had moved northwards. Eventually he settled around the Emin Duir, the Dark Mountains, which we now know as the Emin Nu Fuin, the Mountains of Mirkwood. Now, of course, Orifer was killed in the War of the Last Alliance, ill-equipped and unwilling to follow the commands of Gil-galad, and his son Thranduil returned to Greenwood to lead his people. 1,000 years later, though, Sauron also returned there, settling in Orifer's old digs. The Greenwood became known as Mirkwood, and Amon Lanc became known as Dol Guldur. So now let's dig into that name. The first word is fairly straightforward. Dol is a Sindarin word that literally means head, but is often another poetic word for hill. We see it in a lot of place names: Dol Amroth, Mindolluin, towering blue head, and Fëanor, cloudy head, as examples. Now, Guldur is much more interesting. It means dark sorcery, as if there's some other kind. But Guldur itself is made up of 2 Sindarin components, Gul and Dur. I'll start with the simple one first, and that's Dur. It's an adjective meaning dark, somber. We get that from the etymologies in The Lost Road, as well as from the appendix in the Silmarillion. And we see it most famously in Barad-dûr. Though I also just mentioned another appearance of the word, in its plural, Emin Duir, the dark hills. Now, Gul is a bit more interesting in that it is a word used in both Sindarin and in the Black speech, though it has its origins in Sindarin. In Sindarin, the word originally referenced secret knowledge, arts, and was in fact the Sindarin version of the Quenya word Nol, as in Noldo, lore masters. Thus, it could also mean the deeper knowledge of the wise or skilled persons, if you look it up in words, phrases, and passages in Parma Eldalamberon number 17. That's right. The word Gul was the same as the Quenya for the Noldor. But that same Quendian Eldar piece tells us that the word became further darkened by its frequent use in the compound Morgul, black arts, applied to the delusory or perilous arts and knowledge derived from Morgoth. Thus, per Morgoth's ring, the Sindarin Gul was only used for evil or perverted knowledge, necromancy, sorcery. Now, I think it's interesting that the Sindarin word that derived from the Quenya for Noldor is what we now associate with the dark sorcery of Sauron. And you probably don't need me to give you the most well-known words using Gul, but I will: Morgul and Nazgul. So there you have it, folks. Dol Guldur in all its darkness, its perverted knowledge, and necromancy. And folks, that's it for today's Word Nerd Wednesday. Come back next time as we wander the wide, wild, wonderful world of words weekly on Wednesdays. And if there is a word that you want to know more about, please let me know by emailing Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show and get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. Join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Third Age Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.